So yes, this talk is going to be about the terminal, or as I like to sometimes call it, the black screen of doom. I am Sahil. I made that picture using the terminal, by the way, and I can probably show you how it works. So I basically started my programming life with HTML and CSS and like designing things in Photoshop and a lot of web design stuff. Nowadays I do a lot of JavaScript, and pretty much for like the entire beginning few years, 10 years, whatever, I used to just use a lot of GUIs, like FTP using FileZilla and Transmit, and a lot of basically everything was around GUIs, pointing, clicking, occasional typing, but I was never a huge fan of using the mouse for those kinds of things, so I always like gravitated towards the keyboard. And about 4 years ago, I did this internship where I was working with someone who was really good at the terminal. So I was like, I need to learn this shit. Like, this looks really useful, and I can do things, he could do things really fast. So I was like, well, let me try to learn and see what it's all about. So yeah, I'm going to share a few of those things, a few tips and tricks that I've learned along the way. If you get bored, or if you get confused, or if I say something stupid, let me know. Okay, so can you see what this is? It's the terminal. So, yeah, well, that's the terminal. Most of you have probably seen that thing before. It's an application on your computer. By the way, most of the stuff that I say today is probably for Linux and OS 10. If you're on Windows, I'm really sorry for you.
Bash is coming to Windows 10. Bash is coming to Windows 10.
In a while, I'll be very happy for you. But yeah, not yet. So, why is it called a terminal? It gets its name from this piece of hardware, which was the original terminal. And this application here is basically trying to emulate that. So the application actually is called the terminal emulator because it's, it's emulating this piece of hardware. So there are two kinds of terminologies that you'll hear. One is terminal and the other is shell. And they're slightly different. The terminal is the application program that you run. It looks something like that. And the shell is a program that the terminal runs when it starts up. So if you see on top in the header there, even if you can't read it, it says bash on top. So bash is a shell that the terminal runs for you. And it's actually all the commands and everything that you type in the terminal are executed by the shell. So bash is probably the most popular shell nowadays, but there's also some other useful ones like ZSH and fish, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a while. So let's go to a terminal if we can. Hang on. Okay. Why is it not working? Interesting. Okay, so I have my terminal opened up here. Let's make it bigger. Right, so this is the thing. You can type stuff here. As a user interface, I have to say it's pretty bad because there's zero discoverability, right? If you don't know what to do, you can't do anything. Which is a big pain point, especially if you start working with the terminal and you're not that familiar with it. So I'm going to talk about a few basic commands on using the terminal. Whenever you run anything in the terminal, you always run it in a specific folder. And you can see here the name of the folder, which is like a funny character. It's a tilde. It's a short form for saying your home folder. So on the Mac, it's user/your username. So I'm going to open my home folder in the GUI so that you can see some of the things. So this is my home folder, and this is the terminal. And I can see which folder I'm currently in, the full path, by running pwd, which is print working directory. So you can see, you always know which folder you're in. If you do ls, you can see a list of all the files inside the folder. So applications, desktop, blah, blah, blah. So everything, it just lists out those files. The thing you probably do very frequently is like change directories, go into a particular directory. For that we have cd, change directory, followed by the name of the directory. So maybe like I have a dev directory, so I can go into that. Then I can see what's inside that directory. Then I can go into one of those. Something like that. If I want to go back to the directory that I was in, I can just do cd minus. So it'll take me back to the previous directory. And this minus thing is actually pretty useful. For example, if you're in a Git directory, let's say I'm already here, right? So I'm in a directory which has Git inside it, and this Git repository has a few branches, and if I change to a particular branch like master, I can do the same minus thing and go back to the previous branch that I was on. So I can do like git checkout minus, similar to cd minus. So let's go back. So life is too short to type the whole name of a directory every time. So which is why we have tab completion. So you just type part of the name, press tab, you get the rest of the name. And if you can just go into a directory like that. But again, life is too short to press tab. So there's a useful utility that I use called auto jump. So I'm going to show it to you first, and then I'm going to explain how it works. Basically, you type J, wait, let me try this. Yeah, so you type J followed by part of the name of a directory that you've visited before. So I've been to the scratch directory before, so I can just do that, and it's going to tell me those kind of things. Okay. Yeah, give me 1 sec. I need to.
This is the bit where you start everyone with your knowledge, but you're trying to show familiarity because everyone's seen that.
Yeah. So there is a reason why this happened. It's because I don't actually use this shell very much. Let me just get this. Okay, pretend none of that happened. So let's do J scratch, and so it basically jumps to a particular directory. It does a fuzzy search on the name, and yeah, I use that a lot. So I rarely use cd anymore. So it basically, as you go into different directories, it keeps track of them. The ones that you go into really often, it kind of puts them at the top. So when you fuzzy search on that, it'll go to your most frequently visited directory that matches that. So yeah, that is some basics. And if I can get my presentation. Right. So there's the shell, which basically runs commands. The shell has actually two types of commands. There are the normal commands and there are built-ins. Built-ins are just like in a programming language like JavaScript, you have certain things that are already defined for you. Similarly, a shell has certain commands that are already defined. Like cd is just part of the language of the shell. But then there are a lot of external commands that you can install on your system. And these are things that the shell will pick up. And how it picks these up works through a thing called the path, which I'll show you. And then I'm also going to talk about the prompt. So let's talk about the prompt first. The prompt is basically this long piece of string that appears before you start typing. And you can configure this. I usually like to have a lot of information in there, like the path of the directory I'm in, often the Git repository status, like which branch I'm in, all the untracked files. And I also like things to be colored. You can do all these things in Bash, and you can do all these things in CSS, but you can have them out of the box in this shell I use called fish. So I'm going to hop over into fish, and I'm also going to not do that. I'm also going to use a different terminal emulator called iTerm instead of the default terminal application. It has a few nifty things which I can show you later. So this is iTerm. and it's running the fish shell, and you can see it has, a little bit more information. If I go into, for example, a Git directory, then it shows me which branch I'm in, how many untracked files there are, and extra things like that. And it also has nice auto-completion, so I really like that. And it has nice history search, so you type part of a command, and then you press up, and then you can search through all the commands that you've used before that contain that string. So try it out. It's not for everyone. Today I worked with somebody who absolutely hated fish, and I tried to convince him that it's not that bad. But yeah, your mileage may vary. So yeah, the path, so that's the prompt. The path thing is basically, you have a lot of folders in your system, right? And you want to tell your shell where to pick up all these programs from, like where have I installed all my programs. And how the shell does that is that it looks into a variable called path. So if you have any variable defined in your shell, you can see its value by doing echo path. So it basically gives me a list of directories. What this means is that whenever I type any command on the shell, whether it's ls, whether it's autojump, whatever it is, it's going to look in all these folders for that command. If it can't find them, then it's going to say that the command is not found, basically. And yes. So that's, the path basically, is a list of directories where it's going to look for stuff. So now there are a lot of commands, and it's impossible to remember the syntax of all of them. And so this is where getting help comes into play. There's extensive manuals in the shell about about basically every command that you could have installed. And how you can reach into the manual is you just type man and then the name of the command. So if I want to know more about ls, then I can just type man ls. Now when most beginners get in here, this is where the big problem starts, because nobody knows how to get out of it. If I press Control C, it's still there. If I press escape, it's still there. It's just telling me I'm pressing escape, which is really useless. I know I'm pressing escape. So if you want to quit the manual, you have to press Q, and it'll just go back to your shell. If you want to scroll in the manual, you can just use your up, down arrow keys to scroll. And if you want to search in this manual page, you press / and then you type something which you think might be there. Then you press enter. It'll highlight that. If you want to go to the next match, you press N. So it'll just cycle through all the matches. Any questions so far? Yeah, I think probably that. It doesn't support everything that the Vim commands do, so sometimes it gets confusing if you use Vim a lot. Alrighty. Okay. So one thing that I wanted to show is the terminal is good for a lot of things, but sometimes you need to jump into a GUI for something, and you can do that very easily from the terminal itself. For example, if I want to open the current folder in a GUI, I can just do open dot. Dot is the current directory. So it'll just open a GUI with the current folder. Now I can do stuff in the folder. Let's say I have this file. I want to do something on this file. Then I can just drag the file name into the terminal, and the entire path will be printed for me. So then I can add a command in front of it, whatever, cd or ls or anything. And I can basically you can drag and drop files into the terminal and get their path in there. Another nice thing in iTerm is that whenever there's a path mentioned on the screen, you can basically press command and click on it, and it'll open that file for you. So if you command click on a file name in iTerm, it'll open it for you. If you double click on a file name, it'll select the entire file name, which is also pretty useful for copying and pasting. And if you need to go into GUI, a lot of programs have GUIs. Git has a built-in GUI called gitk, which looks super ugly but is kind of useful, I guess. If you really can't get around what's going on in your Git repository, sometimes a GUI is pretty helpful. And like you can edit files. So I have some files in this folder. If I want to edit them in Atom, for example, I can just do Atom followed by the name of the file, and it'll open the text editor slowly with, it's not Sublime Text. So yeah, it'll open and you can edit it and stuff like that. Yes, so next thing would be the presentation. Okay. So yeah, this thing is pretty cool. Okay, I need a bit more than a minute, but almost there, yeah. Yeah, so this thing is pretty cool. The kind of Unix philosophy behind these shells and terminals is that everything rotates around text. So your commands output text, and you can take this text and move it into another command or into a file, and you can redirect things everywhere. And this thing can be pretty powerful. So for example, a very contrived example, but let's say somebody asks me like, what kind of music do I listen to? And I want to like share my list of artists, right? I can just jump into my music directory, and yeah, there's this strange reason why it's like that. But yeah, so inside this music directory, I have a list of folders, basically all the artists, or grouped by artist. By default, when I run any command, it prints its result to the terminal, right? But what you can do is you can actually redirect this result to a file. So if I use this angular bracket followed by a file name, I can tell the terminal that take the output of ls and put it in a new file called artists. So if I do that, you'll see now that I have a new file called artists at the bottom. And then if I see the contents of that file, it's basically everything. So I can just copy this file and email it to someone or something like that. But life is too short to copy files and email them to people. I just want to copy everything to my clipboard. So what I can instead do is that I can take the output of ls and pipe it into another command. So I can take it from one command and send it to another command. And for that, we use this vertical bar. And there's a command called pbcopy, which basically takes an input and puts it in the clipboard. So if I take the output of ls, send it to pbcopy, and then let's say I open something and paste it there, then I have a list of basically everything that I copied. So anytime you see some output, like you're logging something, or you want to do something with some commands output, you can send it to a file, you can copy it to the clipboard, you can send it to other commands. So for example, let's say I have in my blog, right? I want to see which are the shortest, like maybe the 3 shortest posts with the least number of words. So I have all these posts inside my blog, in my blog. And I want to see which ones are the shortest posts. So there's a command in Linux called wc, word count. It takes in some input and counts the number of words in it. So what I can do is I can list all the files, and for each file, I can execute this command called wc. There's xargs is basically a special command that takes in a list, and for each value in that list, it'll execute another command that you tell it. So xargs wc -w will give me a word count. So if I press enter, you can see now each file name has a number of words in front of it. Then what I can do is I can just sort this output. So xargs wc sort. So now it's sorted in ascending order. And then I can just take the first 3 lines. And I have a list of my 3 shortest posts, for instance. And finally, the picture that I showed you in the beginning, the Ascii Art. So I found this program online called JP2A. It basically takes in a JPEG, and it'll give you an Ascii art created out of it. But turns out that I have an image here. So this is the photo that I used, but it's a PNG image. So what you can do with that is there's a command called convert. It takes in a PNG, you tell it to output a JPEG, and then you can pipe that into JP2A. And you get a black and white. Yeah. So you can tell it to make it colorful, and you can change the resolution, which you can't see because I've made my terminal really big, but you could have seen that. So that's basically the gist of it. We've already seen this. One sec. We've already seen this. Most commands have this basic syntax. There's a command name, and then some flags followed, like dash is a flag. Sometimes it takes a value, sometimes it doesn't. And like a single dash is usually a short version of maybe a longer flag. So, for example, if you have git status, right? So it takes a flag called short, which basically like outputs a shorter version of the status, and also takes a flag called branch, which tells you which branch you're in. But both these flags have short versions. So if you see the manual, you will see that short has a short form called -s, and branch has a short form called -b. So you can just use these instead. You can do git help status -s -b. And usually for most commands, when you have these short commands and you have them in series, you can just omit all the extra dashes. So you just need one dash. So you can just do git status -sb, and it'll just work the same. So you can kind of save keystrokes. I'm all about saving keystrokes. Yeah, I think that's basically it. Any questions? Let me know. Questions?
Anyone?
So you're saying fish, right? All that comes out of the box, you don't have to do. Like when I set up ZSH, then
I know.
spend
So,
4 hours
okay.
on my ZSH.
So look at this. Fish, right? You just type fish_config, and in your browser, it opens all the configuration. You can choose colors. You can choose what the prompt should look like. And you can, yeah.
It didn't help that you told me about fish one day after I spent 4 hours on my ZSH.
I didn't know about
Thanks.
that. Yeah, so it's really useful and it's easy to set up. And even by default, it has all the auto completion and all those things. So yeah, pretty good.
I think you just converted a lot of people.
Yep. I think I spent way too much time doing my engineers.
Spreading the fish love.
I'm going to try to not use the UI GitHub thing now. So, I hate it.
Yeah.
Cute.
I like the auto jump thing. Because right now
Yeah, that's awesome.
Okay.
Alfred had the
Okay, I need to borrow your computer.
Cool. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.